Let's start it. Yeah, because we
This
could
could
loop
just go
on
on.
this. Yeah,
Yeah.
'cause we could talk about our astrology all day long. And we're going to answer these questions today that you so graciously submitted. And it feels so weird to talk at you like that. So we're going to try to make this conversational and feel organic to us, which is our knee jerk is just talking all day amongst Ellen and I about
Yeah.
everything and everything. And without further ado, I'm Michelle, one of the co-owners of Nature.
And I'm Ellen, the other co-owner of Nature. To Michelle's point, we have been sitting on these questions for a little bit because connection as a concept is really big for us, whether it's, connecting with clients on that service level, but also connecting with each other throughout the day. And we do talk for hours while we're working, when we're not working, and
Yep.
talked a little bit about formalizing that into something that might help other people feel connected in any way we can, into some sort of community, kind of pivot away from any sort of hyper individualization that is easy to fall into when you're an entrepreneur or a solopreneur, whatever. You're running your own business. Most designers are running their business from home, and there is a lack of connection that's sort of inherent to that. And I mean, to keep things high level and brief, when we started working together, it unlocked so much with the fact that, yeah, being a lone wolf and never thinking that you were going to work with somebody, and then the vulnerability of sharing creative process, but then what that brings, and then how much more fulfilling work and life feels, able to have that connection with one another, wanting to talk about that, talk about the things that are up for us, and kind of in a way create that sense of connection and community in an audio format.
Like you said, Ellen, I feel completely cracked open now. The vulnerability of designing and letting someone into your world, especially creativity, is a really intimate process. And I think we all get like a little bit protective of like, oh, we're doing it wrong. I don't want anyone to see this. And we're fully raw and exposed with each other, which now has let us get even deeper in our human experience of what that feels like, what running a business feels like, and having you be a mirror to that has brought up a lot, which we talk about a lot beyond just the creative realm, as just like diving into ourselves as humans in this first and foremost. So with that said, we will go through these questions. There was a familiar theme, so we're going to bucket them into 4 categories: design process, reels, mindset, and technical and logistic questions. And I'm just approaching them as a human. It's nerve-wracking because I think there's this idea that we have all the answers and we don't. So we can share our experience with these questions. There's no right or wrong way. Trust yourself, trust your intuition, take all these insights and how we do things as a grain of salt. But this is what works for us. And without further ado, let's go into the design process, because a lot of people asked, what's that like?
The creative direction phase for us is something that we take a lot of pride in. Do it differently than I think most people,
Yeah, I don't
but
know.
yeah, I don't know, but I don't know. A lot of the questions that we ask clients, even if it's in sales calls, like they've never been asked before. And there is, whether they're having a rebrand or if it's their first time having any design work done, I think that it's really easy. This definitely happened when I started Low Tide. It's really easy to have an idea and like you need to get the business going, and then you just go for it. And then you're in the business and you're not taking the time to slow down and think about long-term vision or who your people are, and the more strategy driven questions. And I think by starting off at the top, by asking those type of questions to the clients, it slows them down. It forces them to maybe answer a question that no one's ever asked them before, which is a nice thing. It also gives us a lot of like data to mine from. Again, taking that with a grain of salt, what they think they know about their people, what their vision is, this whole reflection of them. And then from there, we have our reaction to it, right? So we have our own point of reference as designers. This is our world. And so one of the fun things about the creative direction process is that we can then have our initial reactions, taking everything that they've given us and everything we know, and start to pull together a world. And like, this is the first stage in world building, which is how Michelle puts it, which is my favorite way to think about branding. And I think the most important thing about our creative direction process is it is extremely robust. It has a lot of guttural takes of like, this is what it could look like. This is something that could work. This is something that could work. It's intentionally polarizing because there's nothing worse than sharing something with a client and getting kind of like lukewarm answers. We want you to be like, I fucking love that, or I'm repulsed by that, because it helps us get hyper clear on where we're going before we even get into a round of concepts.
Yeah. Piggybacking off of that, I mean, already in the creative direction round, we're showing guttural takes on logos. We're showing color palette. We're showing typography. We're showing submark references. And it's not templatized. So the world is being built from scratch in that moment. And this helps us and the client start to see and articulate things in response to something visual, what their idea of something truly is, or what's resonating with them, or what's not resonating with them, and why.
There's no gray area here. If you're investing in something that you want to be a really clear transmission of you, like it's important to get specific. And I think things can be too general. And when things can be too general, especially at the beginning, and people are still trying to figure out like where, I think sometimes clients have told us that if they've been experiences in the past where they didn't know where it was their place to step in or where to say something. We want this to be a super open dialogue from the beginning. We want specificity. Like it has to be specificity. It is a co-creation. Exactly.
I'll rewind to how we got to this point, and we can show a little example here because I think we're all visual. I pulled up Ravens because I think this was the first point of when we really started implementing this concept of showing guttural reactions, showing color palettes, showing typography, showing references, because before we didn't. I mean, I remember a point where I bought a template of just, this is how you're supposed to present, or even just in Romico, like experimenting with, I remember one time I was, well, we're not even going to do like any Pinterest polls. And like, I'm going to be, I think that the references are what's messing this up, because I think we all go this evolution of just like figuring out where we misstep as a designer, hit the mark. And I think it always starts in that inception phase. We can go down these rabbit holes and they're seeing designs then for the first time and then not resonating with it because we're not having those conversations from the get-go. And when we have those conversations from the get-go, we're then building these little container around us to really get lost on the right rabbit hole. I remember when someone said, well, we just do one concept. I was like, how? I remember doing 3 concepts because essentially just trying to get what we're eliciting in this creative direction round, which is some feedback. And that can be really overwhelming for a client to just all of a sudden have 3 concepts and then they're articulating and then they can't see those worlds together. And then we're confused or resentful because now we've poured so much into these directions without having those conversations from the beginning, which I think is a really just, I don't know why we have avoided it. And maybe that's just the evolution of just learning and trial and error, which is how we learn. But yeah, we'll throw Ravens up here. And I think this was the first time that we really just mind the client, put our guttural reactions down, have a conversation about typography. And with this, with Raven in specific, love you, Raven, if you're listening. She doesn't like uppercase R's. And while this logo was a really honest reaction to her questionnaire, it wasn't resonating with her because she wasn't resonating with an uppercase letter form. And thank God we got that in the beginning, because we could have gone down concept that we felt so passionate about and got really attached to, because there is an attachment that comes with designing. You get really married to these worlds that you're building, and then to have it poo-pooed or not resonate with the client can feel devastating.
Yeah. And it's also a time thing. Like, I think to your point, it's good that we found that out, because if you're doing things like a lot of even like custom letter forms, to then have done all the research on letter forms, hand drawn, gone through everything it takes to get that out and deliver that, you said it best. You need to have this open communication and feedback from the beginning so you can know where to go. This round has been so pivotal for how the rest of the project goes out, because like the creative direction, we're never going to resent pouring a lot into it because it is a creative explosion. It's our chance to like, it's like a whatever my limited knowledge of space, like a supernova. It really is like an explosion. It's a little bit of everything that we think could fit. And it's so fun to do. And like kind of get that back on the rails. What we do is we deliver it to a client, usually on a Friday or a Thursday, and they allow them to spend the weekend with it so they can really, really, really figure out what resonates, figure out what doesn't, form some opinions, sleep on it. And then we get on a call with them and we go through it all together. And that way we're not springing it on them. They're not worried about how we're going to react to their reactions. They've had time to sit with it. And then we just have an honest conversation. We're not like attached to anything or married to anything. We like give them space and silence to work through expressing, like, and it's not about self-diagnosing. It really is about expressing, like, this isn't resonating with me. I'm not sure why. The well is endless. You could keep going. And I think earlier when we first started, that was a problem. And I think people run into that when they're like, how do you know when you're done? I could keep going. Their options are infinite. And by building the guardrails, yes, you're limiting yourself, but then you can fully spread your wings in that space. And it's a much more honest, targeted, and fulfilling way of having a creative explosion because you know where you're going.
Yeah. It's the most important part of our process because it really sets the stage for how we're going to deliver concepts. And with that, the process kind of, I don't know if there's anything new or special. I think it's the same as everyone. There's 3 rounds or 2 rounds, and hopefully the project evolves during the process because trust is built and we can add more to the project. That's always our goal. You know, brand identity is always the first step in and a trust building exercise. And we hope that, I mean, one of the big reasons we started Nature is to be able to grow with a client.
This is the beginning when we're working with somebody. We're not somebody who is going to deliver something and the door is closed. It's very common for clients to continue to add on while we're working together because, to your point, Michelle, trust is built. And we actually do this in the proposal phase too and go before the creative direction phase. This is what we would suggest based on everything you've told us. But if they don't know you, it's hard to be like, okay, you need to do this, this, and this, and this, and it has a huge price tag attached. And for them to be like, totally, yeah, cool, here's a 50% down deposit. That takes a lot of trust. And sure, sometimes that happens, but we always say, this is what we would suggest, but this is what we need. You could phase it out. And a lot of times people do phase it out. We understand that when you're starting a business, you're not immediately going to have a ton of capital. A lot of people are self-funded, and, you know, it's helpful for them to be able to see, I can phase this out and that will be fine. And everything we do in the early stages of like what's required, which is brand identity, which is, you know, the foundation of everything. It's our bread and butter. We're a branding studio, is to really empower clients so that they want to continue to work with us, but they don't feel like they need to work with us for something. They could do something themselves if they needed to. They have the tools. But usually once that trust is built and, you know, we've vision held for them, there's mock-ups galore, whatever. We love to make our presentations like really, truly world building. And then as a quick aside, I will say that when we started Nature, we're starting from 2 different design studios and we started to pull things in. It was really interesting. Romiko is Michelle. It was Michelle. So it was like pure creative, effervescent explosion. And I was coming at it also from a strategy background. So I was more like, okay, how do I streamline things? And one of those things I did was I created templates. Like I had a little stable of templates. This is a template for delivering creative direction, for brand design, for strategy, et cetera, et cetera. And on one hand, the logic behind that's something that, you know, people harp on the internet is, well, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like this is something that it's just holding something, right? You don't need to you're getting different things from the store, but the basket's going to be the same type thing. My bad metaphor for the day.
I get it. I see it. I bought a template before.
Yeah. So, and I really liked templates because this is a time-saving exercise. But I will say it does stifle creativity. I realize that now in hindsight, but I remember bringing in these templates being like, I'm going to impose these on Michelle. I will rein in this creativity and hone it into a sharpened blade. And thank God, again, we are okay with being wrong because you were like, no, I'm not doing that.
Did I even say no? I was like,
I don't think you responded. No. You just didn't do it.
I mean, I just can't do it. So we literally reinvent the wheel every time. And you taught me XD. That changed my life. I was like, whoa, we can even get interactive now. I can make this sticky and we could have my mind just was blown. So, but there's something to that. Like, I think things can be templatized. I know that it's just not part of my creative process because I need to start getting lost into the world now. I need to start building it now. I need to start getting excited about it. That for me is how I tap in. And I can't tap in because not that there's anything wrong with the template, but I'm not seeing the world because it's about the template. Or, I mean, even now when we present things in the creative direction process, we don't use brand fonts. We don't put our logo on it. It's already starting to be their world because it's not about us. Nothing about nature and our fonts that we've chosen in our brand has anything to do with their world. So why should they be even included into this creative direction from the get-go? It's distracting. This has been a slow evolution because I never did a creative direction the same ever. So if you're my client in the past, like if you were all swapping creative directions, they would all look completely different. They're all wild depending on mood or what that is telling me. And I don't know what that says about me or us, but I think it's
I love it.
It's in service to somebody else. So it shouldn't, I think we get hung up on like, well, what are they doing? Like, what's their template? How are they presenting things? And we lose that we are service-based providers. We get to make people's hopes and dreams come true. That's so exciting. What a privilege to be let into someone's world like that.
And I think to your point, not having a template makes it better. Like whatever, perhaps maybe it adds time, but it's the first real push in building somebody's world. When there's a typeface or like whatever in any of the creative direction, everything's up for grabs. It's all intentional. It's not like this is our sans serif, so this is going to be in the corner. Like, no, we put that there intentionally. Maybe it'll spark conversation. Usually it does. People will be like, well, I liked that font. It's like, well, great, because we chose that specifically for you. And I think that it does help you build a world. Now that I have also come to the ranks of rejecting having a template for something like that, it does make the end product like a lot more fulsome and a lot more tuned into the client. Again, it's not about us, it's about them. So as far as like design process, I think unless you can think of anything else, I should say Adobe XD, sponsor us.
Oh.
We do work in Adobe XD. That's how we do all of our work except for the stuff that needs to obviously be done in Illustrator. But that way we can be collaborative in a document. We can see the other person working. It's full of little love notes or like, what do you think about this? And the fact that, maybe we should have said this in the beginning too. I'm on the East Coast and Michelle is essentially on the West Coast. She's in Phoenix and I'm in Athens, Georgia. So different time zones. And it helps it feel like we are in a room together, because when we are designing together, and I can see what you're doing and you can see what I'm doing. And to loop it back down to the beginning as well, like that's really vulnerable. And it was a really tough thing in the beginning, I think, for me too, feeling some imposter syndrome, because I was like, holy shit, Michelle is an incredible designer. I'd been a fangirl before we were, accept it. I had been a fangirl before we even started working together. And so then to be like, well, here's my untrained ideas. And it was really nerve-wracking at first. And I'm like, I know it was nerve-wracking for you too. It's vulnerable.
It's so vulnerable. I remember when we did Collective House, and then this led into kind of our creative direction process. I was presenting to you because I didn't want you to see the messy, and like you came in with the XD and showed all the messy bits. You gave me permission to know that we could show up that way. And now we show up that way all the time. But in the beginning, I was, I need to present to her. She can't know that I have no idea what I'm doing here. And that somehow I'm magically just coming up with this and I didn't show you the behind the scenes bits.
Yeah. And I think also with everything in life, by doing the difficult thing and showing up vulnerably and showing people the messy bits early, it does, it makes everything feel so much more comfortable. Once you push past the discomfort, like I'm so thankful that like I feel so comfortable sharing anything with you that's imperfect. Likewise. Of course, the worst of the worst, and without having to be like, this is so horrible, sorry, because it's just, and I feel totally comfortable doing that. I think it makes for a better creative end result in general. We're not creating in a silo. There's a back and forth. We're ping-ponging things back and forth. Sometimes you'll put in drawings and you'll be like, I'm not sure about these. And I'll be like, oh my God, but this is it. And then I can see something that maybe you can't see, or vice versa. And
Yes.
having that other person mirror back, like I feel way more confident about my design skills now. When we present something to a client, I'm like, yeah, like I used to like sit around and be like, is it done? Is it ready? Not even is it done? Is this polished enough? Have I forgotten something? Am I going to drop the ball? And which is easy to do when you're by yourself and you're in this
Looping.
loop. This happened last week. I was like, hey, is this done? You're like, it's done. Send.
Yes.
And then it's like, okay, perfect.
Yeah. I mean, working with a partner has cracked us both open in ways. And I'm so grateful. So grateful.
Yeah. So there will be an entire other thing on how, as a creative, as a human, having an experience on this earth, emotionally, spiritually, in all things in life, this has completely broken me open in ways I didn't think was possible.
Likewise. Yeah. That warrants its own conversation.
Totally.
But brings us to mindset, which was another one. I love how you clump these into mindset, because they could be interpreted in different ways. But some of these questions were, when building such a rustic brand, how do you know when it's done? And I think we touched on that. Honing in your craft, like feeling confident in design. And I think that is a lot of mindset stuff, of trusting in yourself, trusting in interpreting interpreting what the client gives you, and feeling confident in sharing that, and being open to feedback, and also putting boundaries in place to protect yourself.
Yeah, those questions could be interpreted as more technical pieces, but I think that like what I find is usually it's the mindset pieces that are the holdup. And it kind of comes back around, and I can't remember if we were having this conversation before we started recording or after, but this is a gatekeeping industry. People pedestalize other designers. And I think to honing your skills or being good enough or anything like that, that's all a form of confidence, which is, self-trust. And a lot of that self-trust, and this is like the inconvenient answer, is through practice. And this is also a bigger conversation, but no matter what, even if we totally miss when we present to a client, I'm always confident in what we've presented, because like, even if it was just me, but I trust us implicitly. I trust our process. We have a lot of experience. We're pretty keyed into our clients. And yeah, the inconvenient answer is practice. The confidence and that felt trust in what you're presenting happens through experiencing it. You can't expect to feel great when it's the second brand you've done, when you're comparing yourself to people who've been doing it for years. And what you need to do is just keep practicing and keep taking on clients. You learn to swim by swimming. Experience is going to make you feel confident. That's how you're going to get better. That's how you're going to fuck up and have big experiences, and then also have big wins and breakthroughs and become an incredible designer.
Yeah, totally. I think it's important to have passion projects. And, ultimately us talking right here is a passion project in itself. You can have passion projects to hone in your craft, but the experience of working with other people and what comes up for you in that process is such invaluable information, and growth building and character building, and learning to not take things personally. That's a lot easier said than done. It takes time. I mean, we all get hurt when someone doesn't like what we present, but taking a step back and understanding why and learning from it is all that you can do. Taking away the raw nerve of it is hard, but essential.
Exactly. And I think you just touched on something really important, is like, okay, say you're in a position where you present something you're confident in and the client hates it. Like, let's go like full extreme. It's, I think, really important in those times to then analyze, like, okay, like, what am I making this mean about me? And usually if you slow down on that thought, what you're making it mean about you is narrative based. It's coming from your own wounding. It's coming from your own patterning. Generally what it's going to come to is this feeling of I'm not good enough. And that's rooted in shame. And it's going to swamp up patterns that are old, childhood wound old. And so it's not about the client at that point. It's about what you're making this like perceived quote unquote failure mean about you as a person. Not like, this isn't you. This isn't like yes, you created it. So in like a way, it's an extension of you, but this isn't you. This is a concept for a client. Why are you making it mean that like you as a person are not good enough in general? But that's what happens.
That's what happens. And hey, we are pushing these things too in our own business. And I'll give an example. We've pushed deadlines because we weren't feeling confident in design at that moment. And if you're not feeling confident and there's time and there's like this arbitrary, I like that too, Ellen, it's like this arbitrary deadline. Obviously, there's sometimes deadlines that you have to make. Like, why are we muscling through something that's like, it's not there yet? We just need a little bit more time to feel a little bit more confident. How do you give yourself that confidence? What can we do to build you up to make you feel good enough to share your gifts and talent with the world? That's the most important thing. And then remove yourself when you're in service to somebody that you're thinking they're shitting on it, but they're not. It's a problem to be solved. You're solving it together. And how do you keep that confidence throughout? It's something we don't have the answer to. We're still learning. I mean, we're humans.
1,000%. Like that nails it. Yes, we push deadlines a lot because I'd say 90% of the time deadlines are arbitrary. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's like a client needs to launch something, in which case like you structure things around that. You have to like, work through your own shit in record time. But if not, a client would always rather than you'd like muscle through something to present something. A client would always rather you push it. Always. That's been our experience at least. And sometimes it is time. Sometimes you are burnt out. Maybe you've taken on too much. Maybe something's going on in your personal life and you don't have the emotional bandwidth to do something creative. You need to go on a walk or take a fucking sabbatical. I don't know. Give yourself the time. I think that this is, again, we're not going to get down this rabbit hole, but it's a whole function of this churn and burn, quote unquote, hustle business, patriarchal society that we've put over ourselves, these sort of perfect format templates that we feel like we need to match. And we're not machines, we're humans. And this work is also it's not cut and dry, it's creative. We're pulling from something, it's highly tied to our emotions. And usually if you're feeling that way, like, I'm not ready for this, there's either something going on with you personally, you've taken on too much, you don't have enough information. That's something that I come up against sometimes when I cannot get my head around
I love
this.
when you say that.
It's because I don't have enough information.
And so it articulates a lot of feelings that I'm having in a project. I'm like, why am I feeling this way about it? And you're like, we don't have enough information, Michelle.
And then you're at a position where you can ask follow-up questions for the clients or clarifying questions or be like, hey, visual example, what do you feel about this versus this? Like a little Rorschach thing. If you are having that place where I don't know if this is ready, this isn't good enough, I'm not good enough, I think it's really helpful at that point to say, kind of like the creative direction, get specific. This is always going to help because our brains will generalize. That's how they have to generalize to keep us alive. They take in too much information. They will clump things together and then you're taking that as truth. So if you're having a feeling like that, I think it's really helpful to say, okay, how specifically? Because then you can find out if this is a narrative in your brain or if it's something where like, okay, yeah, this is an actual skill gap. I'm worried that I'm not a good designer because whatever, I didn't go to school for graphic design. That's a mindset thing. Or I'm worried that I'm just like not good enough as a creative. That's a mindset thing. I'm worried I'm not good enough because I don't know how to do this, or like I want to get really good at this skill. And you recognize that there is an opportunity where there is in fact a skill gap. That's perfect. Now you have a action item.
Yeah. This isn't even regards to the question, but I remember there was one point where when we were trying out a lot of things in the business, and you had us go down each task and rate from a 1 to 10 how we were feeling when we were starting the task, and then time blocking and doing the task, and then rating how we felt after. It's a great exercise because there's a lot of parts of the process. It's a really great metrics to measure and see how you're feeling. What part of the process is making you feel not confident? What part of the process is really lighting you up? Where do you see that you're excelling? Where is it flowing? The skill gap thing comes up for us a lot too. There's a lot of ideas and things that we want to do that we don't really know that we're learning as we go, whether it's an animation or you're trying to get something just right. So you're not alone. We're all learning. No one has it figured out. I'm so grateful for you, Ellen. Like just thinking about it that way was such an unlock, and it let us let go of parts of our business that weren't really lighting us up.
I think that the energetic audit of our day to day, it's really hard to slow down and be like, okay, shit, I forgot to say this task. To have like a post-op look at everything and you're like, my God, I didn't realize that was taking me so long. And this is very clear. I started this when my energy was at 100%. And when I finished it, it was at like 30. And then with notes next to it, we would be specific. I felt like this. I hated doing this. And then why? Was it because of the specific client, or was it because, or
The
is there an
process or the
insecurity here?
technique? Yeah. Or what
Do we need to change our, yes, exactly. Is there something that we can change in the process? Is this something that we can outsource? It really allows you to get specific and examine what's not working instead of like, again, generalizing and being like, oh, this just isn't working.
Yeah.
It gives you a lot of data, which is like kind of a boring thing to think about as a creative, but like it's an energetic audit more than anything. Like we care where our time's going, but like our whole purpose here is to create a home. And like, I know you put it that way and I loved it, Michelle. Like we wanted to create this business as a home, like a place that felt like home for us, a place that felt like home for our clients. And if your home feels like shit and is bringing you down, it's more important to us that our clients are loving what they're getting, loving the experience, that we're having a really good time doing it, and that we've created this container that feels incredible. That's more important to us than anything. And it's important to look for holes, because if not, time passes and you get caught up in the business and then you're 3 years in, and you're burnt out.
Mm-hmm. And that was coming from a sense of burnout. It's like, okay, we're burnt out. Let's see what is exactly burning us out, because clients feel when you're burnt out. Everyone feels it, your family, it trickles down into every aspect of your life. And I'm surprised it didn't come up in this, but burnout is something we can all relate on. And I think that little energy audit, I love how you put it as an energy audit, is a really good mining session to understand what exactly is burning you out.
Yes. And this is my final thing I'll say about that. With anything like this, if you're experiencing something where you're not sure why, then dissect that. If you just keep asking why, you'll get to the bottom of it. And I think that when you're feeling discomfort in your business or your creative practice, like take it seriously. Don't overlook it. Slow down on it and get to the bottom of it, because you can fix it. Like likely the problem is your creation. You've created your creative process. You've created your business. Like it should be empowering. You built this. You have the ability to completely change it.
I love that. We should talk about mindset more at some point, because there's so much more to touch on that. And it's such a big part of our process right now, as we're doing deep dives into really articulating what we're feeling and why. But let's get into reels.
Mm-hmm. Yes, let's.
This was a huge question. I think this was like one of the most asked questions, maybe not, process and reels. And this is a new thing. And Ellen and I talked about this before. This is not something that any of us signed up for, this reels way of showcasing projects.
Yeah, go all creatives for having to be like, okay, how do I bend my creativity to work for this like obscure format?
I mean, which we do, because Instagram is a really great marketing tool. It's free and it's how we can express ourselves. And it feels pretty low pressure in the size of pressure and like, delivering for your client. This is, a fun little playground.
Yeah. And I think like it's worth saying at this juncture that we're thinking of maybe doing some sort of workshop or something to demonstrate. This is a difficult thing to talk about without showing anything. So there will be more on this. But I think the thing about reels that's worth addressing is that a lot of the questions were about like, how did you learn the animations and stuff? And the way that reels come together, first of all, I'll say like 99% of the reels that people are like, I love this, Michelle made, not me.
Well, this is our projects together. So if I'm making the reels, it doesn't matter, because we made the project together and there's a lot to work from.
Right. I just want to give you credit. I want to recognize you.
Okay, we'll give you credit back.
I loved making, and I was looking back at a lot of the reels I made for Low Tide, and I had the same strategy, but I think we came at it from different places doing the same thing, which is we were trying to wrap our brain around a new format. And at some point, I know that you were like, I should learn After Effects. But what we're doing is the most low tech, like frame by frame animation. Like I remember I was sharing a reel with you at one point and you're like, can you send me the file? And I was like, sure. And I think I sent you an Adobe XD file that had like 100 slides, because I think we were going to reuse it for something. And I think it's back to the pedestalization thing. when you see something that's cool and different, maybe you assume somebody has a set of knowledge you don't. A lot of the cool stuff that we back our way into is through like experimenting and working with what we know, and like not being like, okay, well, how do you make the perfect reel? It's like, well, why don't we fuck around and find out type thing.
Yeah, I don't think there's any science. How do you make the perfect reel? That's something not quantifiable. There's skills, yeah, but a lot of that is just you have an idea, you have perseverance to figure it out. I know that we could touch on this too. There's people that are replicating our reels, which is how you learn, because it's a quick process. It's a frame by frame animation. So you're having hundreds of slides to do 4 seconds of movement, which is kind of why I would like to learn After Effects, because I think it would just make life easier. But there is this in this digital age, the hand doneness is, I think people feel that.
Yeah, I honestly think that's it. Because like there's a stop motion like flip book effect that you create then, and it makes things feel more analog. And I think one of the reasons that people resonate with the reels is because they don't feel like perfectly polished and sizzle reely. They feel hand done and like, you know, more tangible than what you would usually get from a reel. And that, if you're like scrolling and taking in a lot of content, it's different. It gets you to stop. And I think it's great that people are resonating with it. I think it's even great that people are copying it. Like, you learn a lot doing that. Whatever, that's a part of the creative process in a way. And again, there could be a whole nother episode on that. And yeah, I think it's just the big piece that I think of, like, it kind of, we get it. The reels are beautiful. I can say I think they're beautiful, because Michelle might be like, well, they're works in progress, but they're beautiful. They are little works of art in their own right. I wasn't surprised to see so many questions about reels come up, but I just think it's funny that like the assumptions of like how like dialed in the process is. And I think that's like with all of our process. It's through messy experimentation. It's through play. We like to have fun. You like to have fun more than most. Like, you are pure creative expression. So you like to experiment and play around. And the things that people resonate with the most are like the messy things. Like, yes, these are made frame by frame. Then we pull them into Canva. Sometimes we do things in fucking easygif.com.
EasyGIF. Yeah.
Like, shout out EasyGIF. Also, sponsor us.
Yeah, Canva. Like, I mean, we're real designers. We use Canva. I use Photoshop too. I use both. Sometimes Canva's easier because it has some built-in transition. I'm obviously trying to replicate After Effects. Like, do what you feel comfortable in. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what program you're using. There is no right or wrong way to go about this. As Ellen says, my favorite Ellenism, there's a million ways from A to B. It doesn't matter how you get there.
And it doesn't matter what program you're using.
It doesn't make you any less of a designer. I think the knee jerk is that this tool or this course or this template is going to solve something for you. Spoiler, it's not.
It is actually not.
You trying and figuring out what's right for you is how you learn.
Yeah.
And what's right for somebody else isn't right for you. I could teach you how I go about my reels, but at the end of the day, like, you can, if you get one tidbit, that's great. But at the end of the day, you have to figure out what's right for you, how you want to do it. And sometimes I like this, what Agnes Martin says, and we get to talk about her soon. A lot of her ideas is turning her back to the world. Our world is so fucking noisy right now. How can you just shut everyone else out and just get lost in your own shit, lost in your own process, find your flow? I think it is just that, turning your back to the world for a second.
Exactly. And then the foil to that, I will say, is, and you touched on this earlier, sometimes it is nice to learn how somebody does something. So then you can learn how to do something differently. And so touching on the fact that if somebody goes through and completely copies something, that's a really valuable learning tool. In fact, like, that's how in Renaissance painting, like there was always a master artist. And when somebody would come in that would be working for them and they were an apprentice, they would have to completely learn how to mimic that style down to you can't tell if it's from the actual artist or not. And then from there, because they learned that, they can learn how they want to do things differently. And so it's the same when I was in school, before they would even let you go into creating anything abstract. It's like, all right, you have to nail the still life. You have to try and make something as photoreal as possible, understand life, so then you can know how to abstract it. And so, yeah, if it's helpful for someone to like understand how somebody does something and do it as an exercise and be like, I think I would do it this way instead. Perfect. That's how you develop your own personal style and your own process.
Ooh, I want to pin that. Everyone needs a reference point. And even there was a question about logos, how how we do that. There's always a reference point. I can't make fonts out of thin air. I can build structures of fonts. Like sometimes we'll do a line drawing if we're not hitting that. And like, I mean, even this, like I have like a notebook here. Submarks always come down to just like something pure and true. That's us. But with logos, even that, I need a base. I need like an A to work off of the structure. And then you can go. So like if you need some nuts and bolts reference point, we can expand on this and hopefully make a workshop and let you in on what we do. The nuts and bolts is a frame by frame animation. We're doing the frames in XD. We're, then making those into animated moments and then bringing it into Canva. But that's just a starting point. That's just a starting point to make you feel confident to have the ability to express your own ideas and creations in a new, fun way.
1,000%.
Well, technical and logistics. What is the general timeline for brand projects? How do you divide up work on projects?
For those, okay.
We're codependent.
I was going to say.
Extremely codependent.
One of my favorite things that I've purchased and watched like a quarter of like 1 million courses. I read a ton of books. I used to listen to a ton of podcasts. Like I am so curious about everything, and I'm a forever learner, and I will always be that way. Just because I'm curious to see how things work, how certain people do things. And one of the things I've learned a lot is like, this touches perfectly back on what we said. Take everything with a grain of salt. There's so many people out there, whether it's they actually mean it or they're trying to create content and it's, sort of arbitrary, but who are preaching on the correct way to do things. And just like I told Michelle that the correct way to put together a creative direction or brand presentation was to work from a streamlined template so that we could capitalize on our time. One of the pieces that this is advice that we've gotten a lot, and it's like general advice. We actually had a consulting session with a friend of a friend, colleague, who's extremely successful. And he was like, yeah, you guys just need to like divide what you're doing. You need to divide what you're doing. And then that way, it makes a lot more sense. And we were like, cool. And at the end of the day, what I said before, no. And what I said before goes. Like, we recognize where there are holes in the business where neither of us want to do something and we fill it. However, one of the reasons that it's really incredible being in business together is we like creating together. We have a process where we create together. So we have things that some of us are better at than others, or like have an affinity for and want to do that. And so those things organically work. But we are kind of codependent. We like doing things together. That's why we're in this. We're in this to create together.
Yeah. Yeah. The nebulous phase, the concept direction phase, that's always us. Those pivotal points of the creative process is Ellen and I. There's an energy flow from that nebulous stage that is a joint venture. Surely there's other parts that aren't the core of what we love. Ellen is the voice of our brand. She leads Looms, and I'll do some reels. There's some like give and take in other areas, but the core of what we do, which is creativity, is a joint venture. And I think that, like you articulated it perfectly, like why would we come into this then be sideload, which was the advice that we were given. And we've experimented so much in our time together. I mean, so much that we would love to share. And we just had to get really honest. Like, what is it that we want to do? We want to design together. That's what lights us up. I love Ellen. With that, you get to know ourselves deeper. We get to mirror back to each other. Yeah, we're designing for a client, but then we're also I get to know Ellen as a human. She gets to know me. I don't get to be alone in this. I can't even imagine how I was doing that alone. And not saying that there's not parts that you do alone. Obviously, like, she's not sitting on my lap as I'm like coloring on my iPad, which I wish she would, unfortunately.
Yeah. So obviously there are things that will naturally work for one person. And yeah, we do have overlap when we're working, and we can be in a document at the same time, and that's great. But also, like, I like working in the mornings, and I peter out at between 12 and noon. I mean, between 2. 12 and 2.
You rally though, man. You do rally.
12 and noon. That's kind of my like pitching hour where I'm like, all right, I'm tapped. And you love to work at night. So by the time you're working, I'm some like we work on whatever standard hours ish. But I'm working a lot before you wake up. You're working after I've gone to sleep. Lovely. We get to work together. And there is like a beautiful volleying things back and forth. You draw something. I'll pull it into my iPad. I'll draw over it. Like that pass and forth. Like there's a lot of things where you can look at, if we did like 1 million illustrations for a brand like Violet Commons, we have 1 million illustrations. They're probably half me, half you. You can't really tell the difference.
I don't even know.
No, I don't even remember. That's another thing. And then we'll, probably close this out because it's been a little bit. But there's also no ego.
I was just thinking about ego. You have to check your ego at the door because Woo.
Yeah. Yeah.
It feels good. And I'm trying to check my ego at the door in every other aspect of my life.
Yeah.
This was a really great first step.
100%. Yeah. I mean, this is a training ground. Like your life is a training ground, obviously. And I mean, most of the people listening to this are entrepreneurs. So running a business is like getting your PhD. If there's something that is going to be brought up, like re-triggered, whatever, a pattern, something that you have tried not to feel, it will come up in your business.
Yeah.
And then going into business with another person, again, there's so much vulnerability there. There cannot be any ego. We're a unified force. We are one thing. Sometimes I'll draw something, Michelle draw something. Hers is clearly better. I'm not going to be like, aw.
Vice versa too. It happens on both ends.
Happens on both ends. It all blends in. Like when I look at a project, I'm not like, well, Michelle did that. I did that. I look at it like, no, I'm like, we created this together. I feel equal ownership, even if
it's our baby.
It's better to be in a dialogue and have a conversation than be doing it by yourself. That's in everything in life. Yeah.
And so hopefully this opens up. I mean, I have a lot of insecurities around this, Ellen knows, to be vulnerable like this. I think we see a lot of people in the process, women and specifically, showing up before they're ready and getting their heads chopped off. And I don't want anyone to ever feel that way. And that's how I feel. So hopefully we can have vulnerable conversations and let this be a safe place where there's no wrong question or wrong answer.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, this is just an honest transmission. This is for us, this is something that we want to share. We want to do. This is a passion project. This is something that we both felt really compelled to do. And so for better or for worse, I mean, it's not like we've got some nefarious agenda or we're trying to come off as we're experts. Listen to us. Expert is such a fucking flawed word. We're both very anti-pedestalization. If you pedestalize somebody, this is a Bethism. Michelle and I share the same coach, who's incredible. Shout out to Beth. She said this so beautifully. If you allow yourself to be pedestalized, you will inevitably fall from the pedestal. And that there's no point. Life's too short. How fun can you make it? So that's our whole thing here. How can we narrow in on what we want to do, which is be creative, connect, and have a really fun time doing it? And this is kind of an expression of that. So show up before you're ready.
Yeah. Even if it takes us 5 iterations to show up.
Even if these questions were submitted like a month ago.
Sorry, guys. Honestly, I had to do a lot of work around showing up in a way. This feels extremely out of my comfort zone and really vulnerable, but intimacy and connection are such a huge part of our values and my values as a human. How do we get closer unless we can make some hard first steps of just showing up imperfectly and before you're ready, to your point? No one's ever ready. No one's ever ready. An expert. If they're an expert, they're just lying.
Yeah, if anyone says they're an expert, they're full of shit. Unless they're like, I think that the traditional standard of being an expert is there's like X number of like insane years. And that's if somebody takes on a trade and is like, I don't know, metalsmithing, only metalsmithing for whatever, 22 years, they can consider themselves an expert at metalsmithing.
Yeah, like I don't think you can ever feel as an expert in graphic design. There's way too many variables and there's so much to learn and
it's changing constantly.
So much change. Yeah.
Yeah. We're just like trying to have fun and keep up and be creative. Like there's no one's got it figured out.
Yeah. No one's got it figured out. And we'd love to continue to talk about design and some of the things that come up for you. Obviously it came up for us at some point or something that we're working through, or we'd love to just share. Ellen and I talk for hours on end, generally looping on a certain topic. So we'd love to loop here and kind of come to conclusions, or not even conclusions because there's no finality to these things, but come, bring some things up to think about and talk about.
Yeah.
With
and
you,
then
with us.
Have open conversations. We're all like, this is a wild experience on Earth. We're all figuring things out. Sometimes it's nice to hear what people are going through, if they're struggling with something, to celebrate people. Again, it's all supposed to be done in community. We're not supposed to be alone. We're not supposed to be doing things by ourselves. There's a weird hyper individualization vibe that's happening right now, and I think is coming to a close. People are realizing it, but like the only way forward is with others.
Yeah.
Point
I
blank.
love that. Point blank.
So thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you for your questions. And we're here. Only one click away. Jingle music.
Cue the jingles.